In this video, you're going to learn how to make your own build with each weapon, which will be split into three main sections being Flame, Cryo, and Sludge. At the end of each section, I will demo one of my own builds in a Has 5 no Bosco setting. I also provide you with a training method to test your build and yourself, so that you will be better prepared in a Has 5 all teammates down scenario. Often when it comes to Deep Rock, build choices aren't so black and white. Other than playstyle and individual skills, any points or items you use can be either ineffective or effective based on the rest of your build. For example, if you have a short range main weapon, then a secondary that can handle long range may be extremely effective for you, but not for others. I often see arguments where both parties are arguing over which points are better than the other, but most of the time it's a flawed argument. One person wants to do area of effect damage while another wants to do more damage to one enemy, so obviously there are going to be ineffective points for both parties, but only within context of their builds and overall intent. Selecting the right item for your build has more to do with balancing out your weaknesses and finding out what those weaknesses are. That's why I'll be focusing on balance and how to find it within your own build. I use a lot of examples, so my apologies for any vagueness. It's difficult to tell you exactly how you're going to experience a build when we all have different playstyles and skills. But I can give you the tools to round out your build and have a noticeable difference on your gameplay. So let's get started. If you want to master the driller, you first have to master your map and digging skills. When you're in your map and you find the direction you're looking for, you simply press A or X on PlayStation in order to align your view. This will face you in that direction so that you can drill forward when you put your map down. Now you just have to focus on the angle of your drills. 0 being straight, and of course going either up or down. You can make a judgment on what angle is needed in order to reach your destination. The next thing is to try and not overheat your drills by keeping an eye on this meter. It's best to drill a bit, let it cool, then drill more. The reason is for exploders that may be creeping up behind you while you're waiting for the cooldown, and it's also much safer just to not have the overheating in the first place. Stopping for a couple moments and then drilling is still fast enough to stay ahead of the enemy. Keep checking your map as to not drill into a drop-off where you may fall and die. It happens. Also, learning how to drill straight up by making a small circle is going to be very handy. You simply make a corkscrew shape while angling straight up and jumping. You can use your drills for much more, but that'll be covered in the cryo part of this video. When you're choosing an upgrade for your flamethrower, it's important to recognize the difference it makes on your playstyle. Now, an easy example is the very first choice, magazine size versus range. If you choose range, you'll have to manage your reloads more. If you choose magazine size, then you have to get closer to the enemy because you lose out on the range. Both are great, but they change how you play in order to be effective with the choices that you make. You don't really see the major effects of this until Hazard 5 or perhaps Hazard 4 when your team is down, so at first, it's a small detail. The reason why it's important is because every single build has weaknesses. There is no meta everything in Deep Rock Galactic. At one point or another, you're always going to have limitations to a single weapon, even if that's just ammo. So the key here is to find balance with the rest of your build. Using this same example, if you choose magazine size and lose out on range, I could run dash or sprint speed in order to stay in range of the enemy but also out of range of the enemy when I need to. Or if I had range but a lower magazine size, I'm going to be reloading more often, so I just need something to cover me in those moments. Could be your secondary weapon, or even a pickaxe charge and a dash can buy you time so you can reload. I mean, it really could be anything in your build at all that can compensate for other weaknesses, not just a perk or a secondary weapon. Even the fear on your satchel explosion can have its uses. Balance is everything for a solid build. So if there are things you like about certain points and you don't want to remove them, but you are struggling, take a look at everything else and see if there's something you can find to help you with what you are struggling with. So to recap, in case you're lost, through trial and error, you're going to find weaknesses in your build, whether that's when you're reloading, a certain enemy type, or maybe there's just simply not enough damage on your weapon. I've run into this before. And when you find out what that weakness is, whatever it is for you, you basically can either change something on that weapon, try and adjust your playstyle, or what I'm recommending to you all is to find a solution for that specific problem through any other part of your build. It could literally be these axes that just help you in a time of need and you just have to manage them. It's going to be different for everybody because of playstyle, build choices, and just different skill levels in general. Later I'll walk you through the process on finding these weaknesses and the survival training, but first, you gotta choose an overclock. Overclocks are going to exaggerate some aspects of your build. Could be ammo, sticky flames, reach, damage, and some of them have more intense numbers to deal with than others. You basically have two choices when you add an overclock to your weapon. You can either put points towards the overall intent of the overclock. For example, you add extended mag, and then you put more points into extended mag to exaggerate it further. Your playstyle will be difficult, but there are many builds that can be pulled off this way, if you choose to. Or you can do what I'm suggesting, which is to put the points in the thing your overclock is not doing. This is much easier when you can tell what you are losing. For example, the slower rate of fire here would suggest to put your points into that option for a better overall balance. You want to gain your fire rate back because you're losing some. Again guys, it's not a one or the other option, this game is just not made that way. You can absolutely run a lot of different builds in this game successfully, although some of them are much harder to master than others. So now that you know how points can alter your playstyle, all you need now is a way to test these combinations out and see if you can hold your own when it matters the most. When you're in a 4-person mission and your team is down, you're fighting a bigger swarm and a more difficult one. So this is the survival test. 8 quark mission, hazard 5, and when you get there, get Bosco to grab an 8 quark. Now survive for as long as you can. Here's what you're looking for. Consistent deaths for the same reasons. For an example, when I did this, it was Mactera every time that killed me. One-offs happen, but when it happens constantly, then something's gotta change. So I choose to put points towards it in my secondary gun, though there are other things I definitely could have done. And then my survival time increased. This should teach you how to deal with every enemy type and every situation over time, of course. Don't worry about stupid mistakes. I've died from mine heads, fall damage, and just general randomness. You're really just looking for consistency here. Now you adjust your gameplay or your actual points until your survival time increases. I'd love to show my entire run, but instead I'll show you guys some key moments to hopefully give you guys some better examples. The build I used was this. Here are some key examples of how points change your gameplay experience and build effectiveness. Right here, the thing that's saving my life is the increased damage from both this point and this point. Because the enemy is so close, the time to kill needs to be as high as possible in order to avoid taking damage. And I'm going to be closer to enemies because I don't have the reach. It's actually best just to keep moving with this build, but I was lucky here that they died fast enough not to damage me. But because that's a situation I want to avoid, it's best to get down to a spot where I can maneuver around much easier. The next thing I want to point out is not exactly anything build related, but rather a tip. If you run out of ammo like I did here and you have no other option, use your drills to defend yourself. This build doesn't have any points towards it, so I don't want to rely on this, but again I had no ammo. This is a last resort. So essentially I've died many times running out of ammo or trying to get ammo, and making that slight change of using the drills extended my survival time. The Flamethrower is fun to use in almost any way I have tried it. Sticky Flames has many variations, flame damage is effective against robots, and there's just something satisfying about burning things. Could just be that you need practice adjusting to your build, and this is a great way to do it. And this is what I mean about having a decent long range weapon if your primary is short ranged. I don't even particularly like this secondary weapon, it just provides a good balance to this overall build. Here's a good example of how different points work for different people. If I were to swap these 2 points, so instead of rate of fire giving me more damage, the fear would scare off enemies, making up for not being able to kill them as fast. It would still work, especially for a lot of other players I've encountered. I just have much better luck this way, but that is why we are testing things out without Bosco. If you have Bosco shooting enemies for you, then a lot of builds work great, but that's not realistic to playing with teammates that are down. When you're playing Hazard 4 and under, the health difference, enemy amount, and general scaling mechanics in the game are making you confident with a build that won't have the same effect on the hardest difficulties. For example, try using a Sticky Flame build, but only doing direct damage to enemies on Hazard 3. It works even though that's not how you should use it. You can tell because on Hazard 5, the enemies are getting way closer and it's not as effective. And the point is that this will scale up even more when you add 3 other players. Suddenly you're dying when it was fine on Hazard 3. So testing this without Bosco is honestly the closest you're going to get to a realistic idea of what effect you're going to have on the enemy and your overall survival rate. This will also give you confidence with your build and knowing what to do in many different situations. Alright, by now I'm getting bored because at 19 minutes, I'm feeling pretty confident. So I decided to gather the largest army I could and go out with a bang. I've gathered you all here today to inform you that we will be taking all the minerals, all the resources, and you're not going to be able to stop us. I mean, you can try and complain to Mission Control if you want, but I'm pretty sure they're just going to say, you know, murder their whole family and get the mission done. So, what do you do?
A few moments later.
So, you guys see that new secondary weapon we're gonna use to kill you with? Nah, probably not. It's all good.
12 seconds later.
Have any of you seen Steve around?
2,000 years later.
Alright, let's do this. In conclusion, if you survive for a decent amount of time doing this, then you're ready for an all teammates down scenario in a Hazard 5. Not that it'll be easy, but at least you'll be prepared. This may be a contender for my all-time favorite gun in Deep Rock Galactic. There's just something about freezing and shattering enemies. Once you've played the 3 other classes, you get an idea of how valuable it is being able to freeze an enemy. Not even just for the offensive purposes, but also for defensive. Even just stopping enemies in their tracks so you don't die has a feeling of power to it that no other class has. Snowballs, ice darts, and shatter builds are just a few of the things you can do and still be successful with this weapon. I cannot wait to show you my build at the end of this part, but for now, let's get started with some basics to help you master this gun. The good news is that in my experience, no matter what overclock I've used, this has still been an incredibly effective and fun gun to use, simply because of the power of freezing things. You can use this snowball overclock to flash freeze enemies at range, similar to the cryo grenade for the scout, and this is great against Mactera or enemies that would normally be too far away to hit, especially if you've got a gunner with you that can spot frozen targets and destroy them before they have a chance to unfreeze. Or you can just go for pure damage output and still kick ass. The important thing with this weapon is typically ammo consumption, similar to the 2 other guns for the driller. I find it's easier to run out of ammo before my teammates do because the main weapon is just so effective against so much. So again, this is going to be about balance. A great example is if you're using a shatter build, where you are just holding down the fire button until they shatter, then I highly suggest finding a way to kill certain enemy types without doing that, to save yourself that ammo. Just choose an enemy type or situation and use any other weapon or equipment for that situation. For example, if it's just a group of enemies, you can satchel or EPC mine them to great effectiveness without using your primary. Then just use your primary for everything else, splitting up that ammo consumption. Or the exact opposite, you could use Cryo for groups of enemies and your satchel and axes for single tougher targets. Finding this nuance of your build is all a part of the process on playing it often and adjusting your playstyle or the build itself. But only using your primary weapon is what's going to be your downfall here. So try to rely on everything you have rather than calling down resupplies for just one weapon. But other than the ammo, this gun is amazing. Flash freezing, shattering, however you want to use it. It really does come down to ammo from my experience. and that's just from using that one gun all the time. And when the going gets tough in this game and you're a cryo driller, you can always find your closest teammate and just freeze the bugs closest to them. 9 times out of 10, they will shatter them for you and you can just focus on freezing. It's extremely viable as long as you are not wasting ammo. I'm also going to go over a lot more detail and specifics in my demo at the end of this segment, but first, because it's integral to my build, we've got to talk about the EPC mining tool.
Extremely versatile, this gun can not only get hard to reach resources, but it's also great for AoE damage. Extremely effective against Mactera. Oil shale for quicker drill dozer missions. And even grabbing a friend in a hard to get location. And of course, you can shoot it like normal for faraway enemies. A lot of people can be overwhelmed even attempting to use this, but if you follow these steps, you'll be blasting groups of enemies away in no time. The main problem with getting good with this is that there are few opportunities to actually use it, and all you need to do is use it as often as possible and have a method, and you'll get good with it very quickly. For this, you should start a Hazard 1 mission of your choice. I recommend 8 quarks for lots of target practice and enemies constantly spawning. Egg hunts work great as well. Bring Bosco with you and make sure you have this build. Now the trick is to get Bosco to mine as much nitra as possible. You're going to go through tons of ammo here and you need resupplies. The next part is to only use this weapon for everything. Within reason, of course. But essentially, you'll be using this for the whole time. And don't worry about actually completing the mission. Right away you have to get used to a few things, like shooting slightly ahead of the enemy if they're far away because the projectile speed is pretty slow. You just have to shoot about an inch in front of the bug's face while it's moving and you'll hit it. Keep in mind as you're using this constantly that this isn't how it's going to be when you're in an actual mission. You'll have your primary and everything else to help you. This is just to get this gun down as quickly as possible. Next is getting the method down for EPC mining. Before you can get good enough to trigger it whenever you want, wherever you want, you need to start here. The rest will come a lot easier if you do. To start, don't shoot straight ahead at the minerals. Instead, try and stand as close to the wall right under the minerals as you can. This will make it much easier. Next is timing. This is the hardest part. The trick here is to go against your intuition. For example, you shoot EPC Mine and it misses. So all you have to do now is adjust based on how early or late you missed. You can even count if that helps. So if the orb was hitting the wall, then you need to shoot a little bit earlier. If the orb is exploding before hitting the target, then you need to shoot a little bit later than you actually think you do. It's all about taking that first shot and adjusting. And after doing this for a while, you'll start getting it your first try no problem. If you're running around EPC mining everything, you'll get good with it within this mission alone. Don't be worried about ammo, you're using all the ammo supplies solely for this purpose. That should give you tons of opportunities to do this. Most people don't get to practice it to this degree, and that's why it seems so difficult. It's really not that bad once you use it like this. Now we've got more difficult situations, and you'll find even then you'll have better success because you're already familiar with the mechanics. Like having to shoot frontwards at a distance because you just have no choice. You may surprise yourself, and even if you miss, that miss can actually tell you how much to adjust for your next shot. 1 or 2 of these missions is really all it should take. I think you'll be surprised at how quickly you can get good with this just by using it constantly the whole mission, instead of here and there. After this, I suggest a has 2 or 3 egg hunt mission. Get some ammo, pop some eggs, and start practicing hitting bugs with it. Bosco can revive you, and you can just practice at close-up enemies or far-away enemies. You just have to aim slightly above the group, and you're good to go. This does take some practice, but you'll notice how extremely efficient it is against many enemy types, especially Mactera. Now before I end this EPC part of the video, you're going to notice a lot of opinions about the EPC mining in general, and most of them against using the EPC tool at all. Specifically that because minerals fling away, that it's pointless. Firstly, this doesn't happen all the time. You'll notice very often that a ton of minerals actually just fall directly into the crater, and even sometimes based on where you're standing, you will automatically pick them up. Secondly, that minerals that fling away are gone forever or having to go get them makes it pointless. This is also not true. You guys do realize that loot bugs do the same thing, right? And when you play Deep Rock Galactic, Is everybody standing in one spot? No, we explore and we run around, especially as Scout. If I see a bunch of floor loot just laying there, I have no issue just zipping down, grabbing it, and depositing it. It happens all the time from groups of loot bugs. The point is that I've never had any of these issues. It seems more of a theory than an actual reality. I think when it comes down to it, there is no need to EPC mine something that a Scout is already grabbing. But if you're running along and you see a wall of Nitra, you can quickly mine it. I mean, within seconds, while the Scout is getting Nitra on the ceiling, making the time spent in each cavern less, which in turn gives you more Nitra overall because that's less swarms attacking you, which also means less Nitra spent fighting less swarms. So the time aspect of this game is very important, especially when you get into elite deep dives. Quickly EPC mining something and running over the minerals is not a detriment. It's actually quite helpful. The other benefit to EPC mining is the fact that not every Scout is necessarily going to get every bit of mineral that you ping. So having it is just a way to enable you to get things that you're looking for that are hard to get in hard to get places. You'll notice as you play with many different randoms in Deep Rock that some people just don't care about resources, secondaries, or even events. They'll just run through and hit the drop pod button as soon as they can. So having the ability to get things yourself is extremely handy. And finally, if you think ziplining, platforming, or drilling up to it and mining it yourself is faster than EPC mining it, then you're just being stubborn at this point because it's very clearly not the case. Now, EPC mining is efficient as long as you have a build to compensate for what you're losing, and as long as you're not calling down ammo every 2 seconds. But that could be said for any build, so it's fair game. Now, this isn't an argument that everyone should use it and it's the best thing to use. Again, guys, Deep Rock is not made that way. I just use it because my drills double as a secondary for me, freeing up my actual secondary. And the versatility allows me to, stay alive in many different situations. But I've played hundreds of missions with it, and I've played hundreds of missions without it to the same effect. A fun time. I had none of the issues that people bring up when they talk about EPC mining. EPC mining is just another one of those choices that people have the right to play with. So have fun with it because it's extremely versatile and effective, and it doesn't have to be for everybody.
Alright, I'm going to do this a little differently for time purposes. I want to start where I was in a bad way. I mean, no health, no nitro with a swarm coming bad. Because, honestly, I wasn't playing very well here, but it still shows the kind of recovery that this build enables you to do. Let me show you what I mean. So even though I should have died here, simply being able to freeze everything and get health back was keeping me alive for a lot longer than if I didn't have these specific points. Being able to freeze a Praetorian or an Oppressor, shattering it with an axe, and gaining health back for doing it is just one of the many benefits of this build. Because even though I made so many mistakes and almost died, I could always recover. I use my drills to easily take out grunts while gaining my health back, which allows even more ammo to be used for my secondary weapon. And I still mess up, and I still almost die, but somehow I was still able to recover. And not just get away, but gain almost all of my health back just for defending myself. So I get my health back and I'm pretty confident, and then I realize that I'm actually in a worse situation because I have no nitra at all. With me making so many mistakes in this, it just leads me to believe that there's room for error and there's even more potential for this build. I actually run out of ammo completely, fail a couple more times, and almost die again. And because I have lots of EPC ammo because I use my drills so much, I can afford to get hard to reach nitro really quickly. The fear on your satchel can give you just enough time to revive, buy time for your shield to come back, and in this case, EPC Mine. Don't know how I didn't die here, but I just stayed nitro focused, try to get a resupply down because if I don't, I'm gonna die. Now I messed this up too. All this time bouncing around like that basically got me killed. Or I could have run Resupplier instead of Sweet Tooth. But I do have that other perk, you know, Iron Will, to get me back up and fully recover. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with this build, even though I wasn't connecting most of my EPC shots, and that does make a pretty big difference on your gameplay. Now I died trying to show you guys a throwing axe satchel trick, but I think it's been patched, so instead I'm going to show you a couple other things you can do. One of them is to tap fire your gun to compensate for the time it takes to charge up your cryo. Just tap fire like this so that it's ready more often. You can run around doing this, and then when you need it, it'll be ready, rather than having to hold down fire. Honestly, I use both, but it is a nice little trick to speed up that charge time. The other is to dig a tunnel for easier focus fire. I don't do this often anymore, but it is something I used to do all the time, and it is very helpful in a bind, especially because you can just drill your way to full health. Obviously this is working very well, and I hope it gives you an idea of what I mean about balance. I'm not relying on my primary to kill things, only to freeze things. I don't need a high ammo secondary because I use my drills for most of my kills. And I'm not running out of ammo for my EPC mine because I'm not relying on it to kill everything. I use my drills to kill most things. I can then use the EPC for so much more, as my drills are not only saving me ammo, but allowing me to get health back. With the odd dash here or there, and thorns, every part of my equipment complements each other. And I could even switch out a few things here and there and still be successful, like the health point instead of the shield delay on my armor, and even Sweet Tooth wasn't extremely helpful here. Well, that's about it for Cryo, but if you want more, I will be uploading gameplay videos using different builds so you can see these things in action. And last but not least, the Sludge Pump. I'm not going to go over every detail of this thing because you already have a method on which to test your build and find your way, but I do have some tips to help you do that. When this update came out, I basically only played this Sludge Pump gun for months, so I got really good with it. And although not all builds work this way, for the most part, you can kill enemies just by laying down a single or multiple puddle in front of the enemy. It takes a bit of time for them to die, but you can absolutely use the Sludge Pump single shot to lay down traps or the secondary and clear missions this way. Against Dreadnoughts, if you choose to maximize the slowdown effect, your team is really going to appreciate how much easier it makes to eliminate them. On Doretta missions, if you slow the swarm down, it's going to have a great team effect, especially if you surround Doretta with the goo during the Heartstone battle. But what about for the rest of the time? I find the trick is with this gun, well for most of the builds, is to rely on your single shot as to not tear through ammo using the gun's secondary fire too much. And make sure to keep moving because they do take a little bit to die. And then as long as you're relying on the rest of your build to not use up all of your primary ammo, then you're good to go. But it is easier said than done. It's very tempting to just shoot at everything with this gun because it's effective. It's very similar to the entire theme of this video, balancing your build by utilizing the rest of your equipment more often.
For example, it's okay to focus on AoE damage if you have a satchel or a secondary that can do high single target damage. That's a good balance. That way you're covering both situations. I think the more that people try to make one weapon good for every situation is actually taking away from the weapon's potential. Instead, rely on everything you have to balance out your build instead of worrying about the primary being efficient at everything. Use the same tips from the Flamethrower part of this video and you'll find your way in no time. Due to the time spent on this video, I'm going to let you do some experimenting of your own. However, I have to show you my main build because I've cleared several group elite deep dives with it and many Hazard 5 missions getting top numbers doing it. So this is another build that's been tested and is not a theory, it's a main that I'm proud of and would take into any situation. But you absolutely have to use it right because it's very different from the rest of the Sludge Pump builds. It's a shotgun blast build, which is extremely powerful against both single and multiple targets. And how you do that is for single targets, you want to get closer. The more of these pellets that hit the enemy, the more damage it will do to the enemy. But because it fires in a cone shape, you can actually take out multiple targets this way by getting further back. You see, the projectile speed of this shotgun blast is not like the others. It's not going to arc down as quickly. You can actually hit the ceiling with it often. So if you see a group of enemies and they're far away, you can shoot this and absolutely take out a group of them. Not only that, but it basically deletes anything that you shoot at close with. With this, I make sure to use as many satchels, EPC mining, and axes as I can to try and spread out my ammo for the primary throughout the whole mission. And it works. It works really good. You just have to get out of the habit of shooting at the ground. That's not going to be very effective. What you want to do is use the primary shot to lob pellets at single individual grunts to save ammo instead of just holding down the trigger and blasting everything, which I'm not going to lie, I do very often because it's a lot of fun. Usually to my own detriment because I run out of ammo faster that way. But this build has carried me and others through so many missions since its release. If you're struggling with it, consider looking out for my group elite deep dive video using this build for a more in-depth demonstration. As far as a short demonstration, I'm going to close out the video with it. And if you feel like this was cut short, I feel the same way. If I had a choice, I would spend another 10 minutes on the sludge pump. I do, however, believe that with the method and explanations given in this video, you can apply them to any of these weapons and find your main. People can say whatever they want, but if you can survive without Bosco and a Haz 5, then you're doing something right. And if you did like this video, please help me out here. Liking, disliking even, and comments are the only thing keeping this channel alive. You guys have overwhelmed me with subscribers over the last few months, and it's all because of the people that like and comment. Each and every one of you have made a difference in my life, and that's a profound thing on its own. So, thank you.